I am a solo entrepreneur and I own an AI company. We deliver AI chatbots, custom AI solutions, AI SaaS, software systems, cognitive assistants, AI agents, etc., etc. If you look at Fortune 500, specifically the companies on that list that are creating software, such as, for instance, Salesforce, HubSpot, Amazon, etc., etc. And you compare their value proposition to iNero's value proposition, iNero being my company, you will rapidly realize that even humongously large companies, such as Salesforce, with tens of thousands of software developers, are incapable of competing with me on product quality, product features, and everything that counts when it comes to software development. I don't mean to brag about me, for the record. It's not about me, it's about what I do and my software development practices in comparison to the so-called best practices that all of these Fortune 500 companies are utilizing when developing software. However, me, a single person, is capable of outperforming Salesforce. Even though Salesforce has probably 5,000 software developers currently working on AI. Now, why is that? Why is that? Well, I will answer that question, but before I answer that question, let me just show you some of the stuff that I can do and I can deliver to prove that statement. This is Magic Cloud. It's in its entirety created by me. There's less than 0.5% of the commits to this software system is created by somebody else but me. It's a complete software development platform based upon low-code and no-code software development, orchestration, and automation. I created my own programming language called HyperLambda to pull it off. However, in this video, I'm not going to dive into everything related to it. The most important part is that there's a plugins repository similarly to WordPress. And if you're inside of your Cloudlet and you still haven't done so, you are going to need the charts module here. I'm going to install that one immediately, and we're going to need some example data. So I have already installed SQL Chinook. It takes some minutes, so I didn't want to wait for it for this YouTube video. So now if I go to create, I go to SQL Studio and I choose Chinook here, you will see that I already have this database installed. So this database comes with some SQL snippets by default. So let's, for instance, aggregate artist album counts. Okay, here function F5 executes the SQL. As you can see, it returns the top 25 bands by number of albums released. Let's reduce it to 5, right? So now I got an SQL returning the 5 most productive bands according to this database. Let me copy this SQL now. Let me click generate and choose endpoint generator. At this point, I can wrap the entirety of the database into CRUD HTTP endpoints. I'm not going to do this for this database. I'm just going to create an SQL endpoint. And now I'm going to have to choose Chinook here, which point the default URL changes. Then paste in the SQL I've got here, and now click generate endpoint. Now if I go back to create, I go to HyperID, I expand modules, you will see I have a new folder called Chinook with one HyperLambda file. I can execute this file immediately. Now at which point we see the top 5 most productive bands from the database. For this particular video, I'm just going to remove the authentication requirements and make the endpoint publicly available. And then I'm going to go to manage, go to machine learning. Then I'm going to create a new type called test. I will turn it into an AI agent, safe type of AI agent. If you don't have this flavor, let me just save this guy first. Then you might have to go to manage plugins and install the OpenAI plugin. But I already had it. So now I have inside of my machine learning here, I have a type which is configured to function as an AI assistant or an AI agent, implying it can execute functions on the cloudlet. Now, if I go back to create, I go to HyperID, I expand modules, I expand Chinook, and I click the flash icon. I get here when I'm hovering over this folder, I get to choose my type, generate, at which point I've generated AI functions for every single hyperlambda file recursively inside of this folder within my machine learning type. I only have one HTTP one hyperlambda file, which also is an HTTP GET endpoint, but that's completely irrelevant because there's no difference between a normal hyperlambda file and an HTTP API file, except that the HTTP API file can actually be resolved as a URL. Now, if I go to manage, I go to machine learning. I choose training data. I click on my type filter here. I choose tests. Now I can delete this guy, I guess. Let me make it a little bit wider here. This is just some marketing stuff. And as you can see here now, we now have one training snippet. I'm going to change its description to return albums and artists, right? Then I'm going to save it. Then I'm going to create a new training snippet. I'm going to choose templates here. And here I can create a bar chart. And I can save it. And I now have two RAG training snippets within my type. One that returns albums and artists, and another one that creates bar charts. Then I'm going to create one more thing, which is create chart for albums and artists. If the user asks you to return albums and artists, then do so, and afterwards generate a chart for the data. If you don't know how to generate a chart, you can search for an AI function that does. You can search for a function that generates charts. Save it, go back to types, vectorize my model, which creates some embeddings for each individual record. Click this button, click front end, log in with Google SSO. Now I'm inside of the AI expert system, choose my type here, and then return albums and charts. Now it's invoking my AI function, and then it's generating a chart for it. I just demonstrated 15 features, all of whom are highly valuable, and all of those features having one thing in common, which is that you cannot do it with Salesforce, you cannot do it with HubSpot, you cannot do it with Perplexity AI, you cannot do it with any single software project on the planet that was initiated and created by a Fortune 500 company focusing on software development, either directly or indirectly. That means that I, as an individual, is basically running in circles around 1 million software developers whom cannot, not even in their combined effort, implement what I just showed you. Even though they want it, AI agents have been foretold to basically be the entirety of future revenue, if you are to believe some of the statements about the generative AI. So it's not like as if it's not like something they want. Salesforce wants this. And they've thrown probably 1,000 software developers at the problem. But yet still they can't deliver it 2.5 years later, 2 years after OpenAI went viral and ChatGPT became popular. Now, why is that, you think? Well, this video is a part of a playlist where I go through software development best practices and basically slaughter them one at a time. And all of these companies are following software development best practices. So that basically means that they have a disadvantage. They're starting out 1,000,000 miles behind me or 10 years behind me. Because I just flush all software development practices down the toilet. And I focus on coding, good old-fashioned coding, like smashing my keyboard to generate software. And guess what? That fucking works.